Hey, Rohan, thanks for joining. You've got 14 minutes with Christine. Please keep an eye on the chat for timing. State your name and outlet, and you can get started.
Good. Rohan Patel, comic book movie. Hi, Christine. How are you?
Hi, good. Hi, Rohan.
Um, I love Loki season two, and since you get a chance to come back after already working on season one, what were some things that you sort of wanted to incorporate into the costumes this season, where you can show like that these characters have evolved and changed a little bit from how we met them in season one?
The most obvious thing would be to track Tom, Loki, and Sylvie. Um, in that Tom's arc was obviously we saw him from season one in episode one, but then it became sort of this internal journey for him where the clothes needed to feel like he still had this attachment to the TVA, but we were seeing a little bit more of Loki having choice again to sort of conjure up what he could wear. So it was straddling this like a hybrid of TVA Loki, with given sort of this unspoken storyline that he now could choose his own clothes. And Sylvie, to cross that over, like the armor had to feel like something that she had to dig out from deep in her closet, like something that she wanted to shed, and that her costumes in season two needed to still feel threaded to season one, but that she was trying desperately to ditch them to enter into a normal regular life. So even the silhouette of the coat is a little bit more like what you might truly find in the 80s, and not quite as heroic, or as I shouldn't say heroic, maybe not as much of camouflage that, right.
Yeah. And then speaking of like camp, because the TVA is like, and we've always seen Loki in like the before season one, the his trademark green, but then this season, the TVA is a little more brown, as you can see. And then you have brown, yellow, like it's like these kind of muted colors that you wouldn't typically see in like a superhero that's not super vibrant, because they want, obviously they want to not they want to blend in. But how do you sort of incorporate that color palette that they set, like this brown color palette, this green, like, and you also give each character a little bit of their own flair?
um how do I incorporate it
Yeah,
in?
like the different color. Sorry, just the using the brown and using different shades of brown for all these different characters.
um well, it started, that whole concept of using the brown was because the TVA, I thought that the people needed to feel kind of anonymous and that nobody would stand out, and then carrying it into season two, not only because the story needed to feel very continuous from season one to season two, but also it just in a visual way that I think is very true to Loki. It was how to these characters could traverse many different eras in those color palettes as well, if you think about it, right? So you can, it just, I think there's a timeless quality to using the brown that works uh, through the worlds that we see within uh, both seasons. And especially since you're toggling back and forth between these two worlds, it's not so jarring, where where you don't feel that the sole intention of time travel is just to show time travel, that it just helps to feel like there isn't these big visual leaps between the TVA and going to the 1970s or going to the 1890s. And I think the brown actually really facilitated that in season two.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I love the new character, Obi Key's character. And since he is a character that doesn't really interact with a lot of people until this season, what did you go into designing his look? And like, were you aiming for sort of a retro TVA look, or was it just something like you could, you basically just come up with anything?
No, there were a lot of different illustrations that came up for that, but really, I think the most interesting sort of development with that suit was that Kazra was designing different levels of the TVA for season 2 that we had never seen in season 1, and that there was an intentional palette shift on his part to sort of this mint green world. And in that, the conversation of sort of backdating Obi's character a little bit further back. So the TVA in season 1 and as we see it in season 2 is really rooted in like late 50s and 60s. And we really the way that suit is built and the samples that I referenced are really like late 40s, early 50s, really 40s boiler suits. It was just to try to get him into this very even more backdated mechanic look.
Yeah, nice suit. It looks fantastic. And then so like when the episode 3 is the one where they go to the World's Fair and then everyone has these things, the 1860s, 18. Yeah. So they go back. So how long does that kind of episode take for you to, because it's not just the main characters, it's also all the extras they're getting into suit. So what kind of, I guess, what were you looking for Loki, Sylvie, or Victor Timely, Ravonna, Mobius, and then like just like creating that whole vibe to like match the atmosphere?
Well, that's just it. I wanted them to feel seamlessly incorporated into that atmosphere, that they didn't look like awkward or standing out in that world, that they could be in disguise and travel into these worlds without it being jolting. So, and which was tricky with Sylvie because she did not change into an 1890s outfit. So that was considered in developing her costume, even for her main costume. Like, how could that costume live in the 1890s and not feel out of place? Was also a very considered in the early iterations of that costume we see her in throughout.
And then, so like when you're coming on a project, like look, when you came on season 1, season 2, which has a change in directors now, what's sort of your relationship with the directors and the writers? And are you like involved in the concept art process, or are they giving you reference material to work from, or how's the whole sort of, I guess, relationship between the director and the costume designer work?
It's a big community, and then you have to kind of expand that bubble into the Marvel internal team as well, which they have people illustrating as well as some of the classic characters or any but I'm always doing a banter with, usually I just send my references or my illustrations through to the director and the producers, and we start just having this conversation in it. We hone it in more and more and more, and Kazra, the production designer, and I might exchange color swatch ideas or just talk about tonalities or paint or all these. I mean, it's just a very fluid process between also and visual effects director, so there's so many different elements in making this world, I think, cohesive, as Loki, I think, comes across very cohesive. I think there's a lot of conversations, and then the directors just really kind of keep us all tied together.
No, it's a great show. And so like you have when you're also in the TVA, there's elements of future, because when you're designing Mobius's his spacesuit that he wears in the first episode, what's sort of your reference point for something that is futuristic but also at the same time feels like something that's from the past. And then since, you know, the TVA is not, it can be happening whenever.
Definitely references were dragged from like a bomb suit. I mean, I just traversed so many different avenues of what that suit could be. The main goal being very awkward. So it went from like a deep sea diving suit reference to bomb suit reference to so many like into the volcano references. There were so many different references, but also just knowing that we had to add some quirky element to it, which the triangular faceplate just sort of helped to take it completely into this lands in no era design. But no, the whole concept is just, and literally just even the padding of that suit, the quilted shiny padding comes from like a 1950s scuba suit. And there's so many different elements dragged from all over the references of historical pieces, which is really what Loki is. And also just trying to keep the choices more practical, like that everything has a purpose. Like everything is very purposely intentional in that design.
Awesome. And so then this season also has the big I think it's episode 2 where they have the McDonald's and Sylvie and the McDonald's and the whole, you know, you recreate an old McDonald's. So were you able to like get your hands on an old uniform, or were you looking at I don't know what you would be looking at, but like, you know, just pictures of old time and like being able to recreate all those costumes for Sylvie and her coworkers?
I got my hands on a old McDonald's handbook, and it outlined sort of that era of a uniform, and that uniform ended exactly in that year. So really that's why it has that, it almost feel, any decade really starts out kind of looking like the previous decade. So that's why it has a little bit of a 70s vibe. But believe it or not, we couldn't really find real pieces to order off of eBay. Like I had to figure out what the apron was going to look like, or the hat, or so it was just a lot of trial and error trying to get it right and to make it feel like the real thing. And we got the stamp of approval. I think we got it. I think we did it.
Yeah, no,
We had to.
it looks really cool. And then like I don't want to keep you too long, but then you also in last season you also worked on He Who Remains. Like this season you work on Victor Timely, who's a much different character. But and you designed his suit. That kind of, were you at the time working with what we saw, like what became of Kang and how his costume turned out? Was there any like collaboration between you and the Ant-Man team, or was that just something that you were hoping to carry over into season 2 instead?
No, there was no collaboration with that. We were definitely I just was carrying off of season 1 really, and what we did with He Who Remains. So no, definitely.
Gotcha. And then also, okay, so like out of all these, since you get to play with so many different eras, is there a particular era that you do find you know, as extra fun, like your favorite era, I guess, to play in?
Listen, I love, in terms of the ones we did do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Gosh, I loved them all. I mean, it just in terms of building costumes, the 1890s was really fun and very fulfilling process, because you get to deal with millinery work and you get to deal with embroidery. There's just so much more depth to those costumes. But the 70s is also really fun to do all that glamour coming out of doing, you know, the bureaucracy of the TVA. Is really fun to do that. And the 80s, who doesn't have fun doing the 80s? It's always really fun. And to figure out how to do all those and not have them be really campy is just, yeah, that's, I'd say maybe the 1890s.
Awesome. Yeah, I could watch a whole season based
For
on that.
today.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Christina. I really appreciate it. I love your work on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.